Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Michael Lampe, and I am here to talk to you today about EDTE 731. It's an introductory lecture, and I usually do this in a webcam situation. However, with this pandemic situation going on, I feel like I haven't been to the barbershop for a good few months now. So instead, I'm giving you a nice little selfie picture I took in Aruba. Was working with some faculty members at the University of South Carolina to help faculty from the University of Aruba to blended learning strategies. And it's very interesting that they were going into blended learning and now everything's mostly online. Trying to look at that and from a developing country is a very interesting, unique situation. So feel free to talk to me more about that if you'd like to learn more. So essentially, I want to get started talking to you today about you know, where I've come from, what do I do, and this is just to help you kind of give perspective of things I might be talking about so it doesn't completely blindside you. All the content in all of the course sections are the same, but, giving my take on things of what you're going to be reading and studying, it's nice to kind of know up front where I'm coming from. So I finished my doctorate in education, concentrating in educational technology. I was looking at active learning classrooms and how to train faculty members and then help administrators understand the needs of the faculty members. So where they should put their funding, what kind of classroom design they should be doing going forward, how do they standardize the classroom experience a little bit more. So that's what I did. It was a mixed method, so doing a little bit of focus groups, doing a little bit of survey distribution to kind of help me get a triangulated data on that front. So if you decide to go into the doctorate level, feel free to talk to me about how to make that work in your own context. I also got my master's degree from Marquette University, focus on educational policy and leadership and student development theory on that front. And then I did my bachelor's at St. Norbert College. This is kind of like the Wofford of Green Bay. The Green Bay Packers like to come and do their training camps and kind of have a communal experience at the campus. It's a small liberal arts college that I went there. When it comes to the actual experience, I started off in the student affairs world. I loved what I was doing at University of Wisconsin Green Bay Sheboygan campus. It initially was UW Sheboygan. They've done some reorganizing since I was there. And then after my master's program, I went into the Student Success Center, and this is where my educational technology concentration started. They needed help with online academic support, so I helped train the coordinators and figure out ways to do best practices with the students. Is essentially like a way of trying to increase retention. And then afterwards, I went at the University of South Carolina upstate. I couldn't say no to the job where it talked about building these new classrooms that are not your typical lecture style situations, implementing active learning pedagogy. So I started doing that, and then later on they wanted to expand their online programs, and they asked me to help out revamp the online teaching certification course and get more of the programs online. Lastly, I didn't leave South Carolina because there was a bad situation. My fiance actually, she was finishing up her fellowship at in Norfolk. We initially met in South Carolina, and we were trying to figure out what states or cities we would like to live in, or what were the best opportunities for her, field of study and what she wanted to research. And I was like, there's universities all over the country, and online education is not going away anytime soon. So we landed in Colorado. We have family out here. And right now it's actually a very interesting time in this pandemic situation. Not only are most universities, and you as K-12 teachers and administrators are dealing with it too. It's, we all have to go online for this short period of time, maybe longer period of time, depending on what happens. So not only do you need to find ways to, create good quality education, with your situation and having maybe children of your own or or you don't have the space or the technology to do it, but you still have to do it nonetheless. You also have your students who are fighting for internet, are fighting for, doing their chores around the house and making sure that they don't bother their parents who might be working. So it's a very interesting situation. So for me, pharmacy education is very unique because once more, we're also having to deal with students not having the ability to go into hospitals or go into pharmacies to do their experiences. How do you allow, that type of experience to take place online? And so those are challenges that I'm working with faculty members on a daily basis, let alone the faculty members some of them are on the front lines and being able to, do their job, but in a situation where, they're exposed to COVID-19. So I have to be mindful of when I'm working with them to implement technology into the instruction online, that I have to be aware that they might be very stressed out. And then as well, the students are also stressed out because they're in the home environment as well. So overall, just a very interesting time to be in education, especially educational technology. So really quickly, I wanted to just talk about what I see educational technology being about. I think when we look at instruction and classroom stuff, face-to-face stuff, I think at the end of the day, there's the two circles of student development and instructional design are typically the two common elements that we see. We want to make sure that whatever we do is for the development of the students. Are they being able to show us that they have the behaviors necessary to be a citizen of, South Carolina, of the United States? That's the idea of national public education. And then the instructional design part is, can we do that in a measurable way? Can we have the learning objectives? Can we have the assessments? And then can we have the activities of the courses all aligning into one place? Now, I think where the educational technology piece really comes into play is the field of information science, or some people like to call informatics. It's being able to capture that in a digital way, whether it is students creating things using, iMovie, or using collaborative documentation like Office 365 or Google Classroom. And then the other side of it is, can we have a backstage situation where I can measure that the students are doing X, or like kind of assessing the data after the fact. So for example, in this course, you're going to be looking at videos through a tool that I use called TechSmith Relay. And it's the same company that uses Camtasia. When you watch the videos, I get information back saying, Tim, if your name is Tim as a student, watch 80% of the video. So I usually kind of give a threshold of like 80% of the time. If you watch 80% of the video, you pretty much watch the whole thing, give or take. Maybe you clip the end of it because I was rambling, right? So that's where I think all of these three, major fields kind of come together, and I think that's where ed tech kind of fits in all three. So when it comes to information science, essentially, I look at it as a lollipop. Think about those Tootsie Roll Pop commercials. It's how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? The same thing takes place. It's how many clicks does it take to get to the center of your content? You shouldn't necessarily need to have barriers. Like, how can you intentionally design your course or intentionally design your digital activity so that it lowers the amount of barriers? Are you asking your students to have to interpret the different interfaces or the ways that they move around a website, for example, making sure that you lower it? So the more technology tools you're asking them to do, the more, translating or, editing a video, for example, that just increases to the amount of possibilities that a student might fail and might back out of an activity. And that's the last thing you want to do. Obviously, there are times where they're going to need to do some of that stuff because it's just part of the requirements of the education system, but for the most part, try to do what you can. One of the other things I think is really interesting is how we term things, being very student-centered when you're terming things. So for example, our Blackboard instance, we have a place called course documents. In the default settings, in the left navigation menu, there's course documents. Well, sometimes I've seen course documents be the whole entire course, and then there are times where some people use course documents as only the syllabus and the schedule and those kind of things. So I take the latter approach. I think course documents are mostly just like actual documents that are going to tell you what this course is about, and I leave modules, which is how our left navigation menu is. So again, using terms in a very intentional way, using course design in a very intentional way will always do you good. The other side of it is student development models. I think that it's very important to be student-centered as much as possible. I had a very strong foundation in theoretical understandings of this. Sanford and Tinto both looked at retention, of making sure that you're supporting the students through academically integrating them and socially integrating them. And when you have both of them, you're more likely to see students succeed. Sanford is this just basic idea of, if you're going to challenge them to a certain degree, try to make sure that there is just the amount of the same degree in the support that you give them. So how do you make sure that that takes place? The other part of it is Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. I think is very interesting, because all it's saying is the student behavior will be impacted by the direct interaction with the faculty member or the instructor. And then if you go to the outer rings of Bronfenbrenner's model, it talks a little bit about how policies and federal regulations all go back to impact the students. So you have to make sure not only what are you doing in the classroom, but what is the school district doing that might be impacting the behavior, and what is the state doing? For example, I know that computer science standards were released not too long ago, and I know that there was conversation from teachers that I was teaching in the same course. They were worried because you're already having to do so much in the curriculum with these standards, so how are we just putting this to another, putting another load onto the mix that's already difficult to do? And last but not least, Baxter-Magola's self-authorship theory really impacted me, just because I love this whole crossroads idea. Is you essentially have a student walking into an educational experience, and most likely they're getting confronted with what they might be being told in their community, and to be aware that that conflict of ethics, morals, knowledge is being conflicted. The student has this kind of choice of, are they going to go and abandon ship and just go back to their community and completely deny what they learned in school, or are they going to fully embrace it and completely ditch their community that they went to? Or is there going to be a little bit of both? Most of the time there's a mixture of the two, that they appreciate where they came from, but they also learn new things that are going on in society, and how to make that work. So as I mentioned before, this idea of policies and procedures, this is kind of more direct application of Bronfenbrenner's approach. What do you think? What are you doing to ensure you're not violating copyright? And that's a national, international thing, right? So what are you doing that you're making sure that when you're recording stuff online that violation is not taking place? What are you doing to ensure that your content is accessible? Again, another policy in which it's technically the law to make your content accessible in public education, but what are you doing, or what policies, or what behavior that impacts your instruction, which then leads to your students? And then is the school providing resources to become informed? So as much as this is all policies and procedures from more of a national level, what is your school district doing to make sure that you do what you need to do to make sure that these regulations are being put in place? And what is the indirect impact from the students who need the accessibility? And what are the indirect consequences for those who don't need the accessibility situation? So that's something to think about. So essentially, when it comes down to everything, I like to say, what's a digital visualization? I think that when you dive into digital content or digital creation or any type of educational technology situation, here are kind of three things that I would say to start doing already as you're going through this course. And how do you think this through when you're starting to learn this content? I think about building a library of friendly examples of quality course design. When we were building these active learning classrooms, we decided to do lesson plans as part of the requirements of the faculty development. And when I asked them to send them to me, I put them in a library so that faculty members, if they want to get ideas on how to do something different, they can do that. Along with building the course design I mentioned about the faculty development, I think there's always this great opportunity of doing intentional programming and to build community. Is there like a small group of people that are wanting to look at how to implement, Google, Google Sites, for example? Getting a small group of people together and having them do a digital artifact of what they did in that programming, you can then show other teachers who might be a little bit more hesitant to show them, hey, this is actually possible. And then finally, I think the important thing is recognizing those who are actually doing excellent work. I think especially when you don't have a lot of funds to monetarily give people the rewards or the awards, doing something. So if you're an administrator, putting on a newsletter about educational technology, putting a spotlight on a teacher that's doing some excellent work. So at the end of the day, I wanted to be as short as possible here. It's all about being intentional about designing your environment, activities, and assessment when using technology. So it's not about using the technology for the sake of using technology. It's about, okay, I'm doing this thing. I feel like this part of the activity is just very, hard to do without the use of a technology tool. What's out there? And then go into it. It makes life so much easier. And then the second thing is learn from your fellow teachers and administrators who might have a different perspective. And I think that's always important. Can you, pair up with another teacher that's doing something a little bit differently, and how do you learn from them and they can learn from you? And then last thing, again, what I mentioned before, the technology comes second to the content. So while there are situations here where you're going to have to just try new technology out, that's just part of the situation of what comes first, the chicken or the egg situation. But always try to put the context first. So, all right, well, I think that's it. If you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to email me. If not, I look forward to having you in my course, and I will be here as much as I can to give you feedback. So good luck and have a good summer.